because we live in a universe many light years in diameter, and we're made of particles that were once all converged into a single unit, a matter of fractions of a second after what's called the Big Bang, what scientists believe is the beginning of our universe. So if you could take all of the space out from between all the particles in our entire universe, many light years distant, and bring all those particles back together, scientists say that we would take up about the space of a single green pea, very compact, very hot particles of matter. And this is where we were at one time, the particles of your body and our listeners and my body. We were once part of all the stars, and we were once part of this Big Bang. And if we were once connected, even though we are now physically separate, the experiments suggest that the energy connecting us remains. And when I began to understand that as a scientist, it helped me to understand when I hear the ancient and the indigenous people say, we're all connected, we're all one, suddenly it began to make sense. Because my mind needed something to hang that nice thought upon. I wanted it to be true. I just didn't know, in my training as a scientist, there was nothing that led me to believe that it could really be true. So the entanglement is one of the descriptions of the nature of this relationship. The second is what is called a hologram, or a holographic principle. And I wanted to lay the foundation so we could share both of these together. In a hologram, the definition of a hologram is that every piece of something mirrors the entire something, no matter how large or how small that is. So I'd like to give an example of what that means. I'm a very visual person to help illustrate this. Back in the 1980s, there was a series of bookmarks that came out in the New Thought community. Little shiny strips of foil that had images that were put there with a holographic process. And if you held them in the light just right, you would see that image actually come alive. It looked like it was hovering above your hand. And there was an image of the face of Jesus and Mother Mary, and there was one of a great pyramid and the dolphin and a rose unfolding. There are a number of them out there. Those little bookmarks, if you have one, you can do an experiment, but you can only do it once because you'll destroy your bookmark in the process. But if it's truly a holographic bookmark, you can take that bookmark and you can cut it into a bajillion little pieces with a pair of scissors. And you can take the smallest one of those pieces, a little fleck under a microscope, with an X-Acto knife and cut it in half, even again, and take that little fleck and look at it under magnification, and you'll still see the entire image in that fleck, no matter how small, no matter what shape it is. And this is, by definition, this is the holographic principle. Every piece of the something contains the entire something on a different scale of magnitude. And this is important because it is now believed that we are holographic in nature, that we mirror all that there is in this universe, that the universe is holographic in nature. William Blake said this so beautifully in his poem. He said, the entire world is reflected in a grain of sand. And it's more than a nice poetic saying. There's truly something to this fact. And it is through the holographic principle that nature, it's one of the most powerful principles in nature, and perhaps one of the least understood, because it is through the principle of the hologram and the entanglement that nature can create a lot of change in the entire universe by initiating that change in only one place. Because by definition of the hologram, every fragment mirrors the whole. So when a change is made in one fragment, that change is mirrored in the whole of a living hologram. That's important for us because it says to us that when we create peace at our family dinner table or in our communities, for example, that peace is experienced in the hologram of consciousness of the divine matrix in a way that extends much more than simply, or is not simply limited to our family dinner table or our prayer group. And this is why our prayers, people ask me all the time, they say, if I am praying for my loved one in the battlefield of Iraq halfway around the world, I can make a really good prayer, but how do I get the prayer over there? I mean, it's got to go a long ways. How do I get my prayer from here to there? And this is the beauty of the hologram. In the two particles that were separated by 14 miles, when one of them had its experience and the other one acted like it had its experience, scientists say, how did the information get from one to another? And in the hologram, the answer is it doesn't have to, because it's already there. The information doesn't have to travel because it's already everywhere all the time. Our prayers, when we create them in our hearts for our loved ones, are already with them on that battlefield halfway around the world. When we speak to our loved ones who have passed over into another world, what we're actually doing is we are speaking to the essence, their energetic essence, that is now within the layers or the higher dimensions of this divine matrix. And we don't have to pump or send our prayers into the 8th dimension or the 9th dimension by virtue of being in our hearts, because we exist in those dimensions as well. It's already with them. The whole idea of dimensionality, 25 years ago, as a scientist, if I walked onto a stage and talked about anything in a live audience, talked about anything happening in higher dimensional state spaces, there's a good chance it'd be laughed right off the stage. And now, because scientists simply didn't acknowledge or mention much more than the 3 or 4 dimensions that we deal with now, third dimension is our physical world, and the 4th dimension being time and time-space. There are a number of new theories that scientists are developing to explain and unify the laws of physics as we know them today. And this has been the great challenge of Western science, is we haven't been able to come up with one story that explains the entire universe, because our stories are fragmented. The mathematical stories of quantum physics or the mathematical stories of Newtonian physics, they don't mesh. They cannot work together to give us a coherent understanding of the universe. And where this may be changing now is science has come up with new theories, a number of different theories that are actually able to merge quantum mechanics and the Newtonian theories together. The quantum theory saying that we live in a universe of energy, and the Newtonian theory saying we live in a universe of things. And it's the mathematics that describe the energy and the things they're trying to link together. Well, the new theories are called string theories. And although there are a number of different string theories, 11 at least, there is now a superstring theory that brings them all together. And the reason I'm saying this, what makes it so interesting, is for these theories to work and to unify the quantum mechanics and the Newtonian mechanics and the physical and the energetic world. To do that, the theories require that we live in a universe of at least 11 dimensions and very possibly 25 dimensions. They say they must be there for these theories to work. And what's so interesting is the higher you go in the dimensions, the simpler the mathematics become. And where everything looks separate in our 3-dimensional world, in our polarity world, everything is, we live in a world of pluses and minuses, men and women, light and dark, hot and cold, black and white, true and false, love and fear. We live in this polarity world, and this is where the mathematics do not work, and I would expect that they wouldn't work here, because everything here is in that separateness. However, the beauty of these new theories and the way that they tie into the ancient and the indigenous traditions, both of life and death, and life continuing after death, what we call the death, is that they require this higher dimensional experience. And the higher you go in these dimensions, the mathematics become simpler and simpler and simpler, and they actually unify in the higher dimensions. Very, very simple mathematics. And the reason this is interesting is because what the studies now have shown is that when you and I have a feeling, coherent heart-based emotion in our feelings, those emotions are actually coherent. They're linked, they're in resonance with these higher dimensions where everything is one. So when we're having an effect, when we have a feeling and we see a physical effect in our world, it's not that our feeling changed something in this 3-dimensional world. Rather, our feelings are speaking to the blueprint in the higher dimensions, and we're seeing the shadow of that change in our physical world. And this, to me, tremendous implications in terms of life and death, our soul, the seat of the soul, where do we come from, where do we go in between lives, where do we go after we die, do animals have souls? All of these questions, these understandings now are bridging the language of science and the language of spirituality. And the ancient and the indigenous traditions have been here for 8,000 years in a very exciting new way that gives us this very holistic picture of who we are and how we relate to one another and what life is really all about. To me, that's very exciting as well.